Welcome. One of the most interesting facts about this story is this. An entire family, father, mother, and two young children seem to disappear. The father is a local business owner, and his parents and other family live in another state. When the entire family goes missing, it takes nearly 2 weeks for alarm bells to go off. And from everything I could find, there is very little media about this story. Practically non-existent coverage of what happened to this family. To this day, there is a surviving family that is left with no answers, and the likelihood of ever getting those answers seems to have died, almost literally. They say nobody can hurt you like family members can, but we usually mean those words figuratively. We mean that family members can push your buttons or say harsh things. Not that we truly believe that any family member of our family would harm us in a way permanent or in final ways. But some betrayals cut very deep, bone deep. Join me as I explore the odd mystery story of the tragic unsolved missing Thompson family. No good deed goes unpunished. In July of 1996, one family learned the truth of this saying in a far more visceral way. Every member of the Thompson family was most likely murdered by Lydia Thompson's own brother, but no one has any proof of this. As far as any evidence is concerned, the family is just gone, vanished into thin air. Lydia Thompson, who is aged 43, lived with her husband, Everett Thompson Sr., who is aged 40, as well as their sons, Everett Jr., aged 11, and Andrew Thompson, aged 8. They lived in a nice home in the Chatham neighborhood of Chicago's Cook County, a home Lydia inherited from her mother. Everett also owned a business, a pizzeria called EAT and Company. The EAT is Everett's initials. The pizzeria didn't appear to make any headlines or impress any critics, but it nevertheless helped the Thompsons to live a nice lifestyle. They were a prosperous, happy family that kept to themselves. Unfortunately, they also had what Everett's family referred to as a freeloading house guest. He was also a dangerous house guest. In February of 1996, Lydia's brother, Kenneth White, finished serving a prison sentence on a rape charge and moved in with Lydia. He'd been in and out of jail his entire life. In fact, serving sentences for other sexual assaults and burglaries. Lydia apparently helped pick up the pieces each time he returned. Either fear or a sense of familial duty kept White in the home even though he frightened the boys and upset Everett. As you'll soon see, the Thompson family kept White in the home even after he crossed a major line, one that foreshadowed the tragedy that would soon occur. On July 3, 1996, Lydia put in a call to 911. She told dispatchers that Kenneth had threatened her with an axe. Police arrived on the scene, but by the time they arrived, the altercation had resolved on its own. They left without making an arrest. The responding officer also got a look around the house, which seemed very normal at the time. Later, this would not be the case. Perhaps the responding officers left Lydia with the feeling that they could not or would not help, as well, because when Kenneth caused trouble again on July 5th, Lydia didn't call the police. She called her husband instead and begged him to come home. Everett had been at work at the time, and he'd also been on the phone with his father. He told his employees and his father that he was headed home to check on Lydia. He left the restaurant at 3 p.m. on that day. At 5 p.m. on that day, Kenneth White showed up at the restaurant instead. He claimed Everett Sr. wouldn't be in for a few days. He had said, as Kenneth explained, been arrested over a traffic accident. Later, police would verify that no such accident had ever happened. The manager at the restaurant observed that Kenneth had bright red smears on his new white gym shoes, but apparently this wasn't enough for him to contact the authorities or to ask Kenneth what was going on. After Kenneth left, he began a campaign of misinformation around Lydia's neighborhood. He told the neighbors that the family was on vacation or that they'd moved to Pennsylvania. By this point, the entire family had disappeared. So had their vehicle, and their bodies. It took 12 days for Everett's parents to call the Chicago police, expressing concern that nobody had heard from Everett or the family, not even his employees. On July 17th, the police finally returned to the Thompson home. The police went to the Thompson home and found only Kenneth, who said his sister and her family were fine and had taken an impromptu vacation to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where Everett was born and where his parents lived. The police could find no evidence of foul play, and the Thompsons' van was missing, which supported White's story. They left without investigating anything further. Over the next few weeks, Kenneth told various versions of the impromptu vacation story to people, variously claiming that the Thompsons took a bus to Philadelphia, that they took a bus to Minneapolis, Minnesota, or that they went to Hawaii. Kenneth was driving the Thompsons' van when he was arrested for falsifying Lydia's signature on a check, but the police didn't realize that this contradicted his earliest statement to them. In late July, Everett's parents traveled to Chicago and tried to find the family, investigating on their own, speaking to the employees of EAT and Company, but their efforts were unsuccessful. They asked the police to investigate further. The restaurant manager told the police about White's statement the day that they last saw Everett, but there was no record of Everett ever getting arrested or being associated with a traffic accident. Authorities also learned that in the Thompsons' absence, Kenneth had forged Lydia and his other sister's signature on documents to sell their home. An inspector visited the home before the sale, and he noticed that there was one toilet and one bathtub that had recently been painted red, and the kitchen floor had been torn out. These changes had been made sometime after the police visited the home on July 3rd as well. They examined the house, and the kitchen floor had been fine. There were no red bathroom fixtures. By the time the police uncovered the illegal sale, the new owners had already had the house gutted for renovation. Police suspected Kenneth had murdered his entire family, but they were powerless to do anything about it without finding bodies. Kenneth felt like he'd been cheated out of his inheritance. That's probably why he forged the power of attorney document in Lydia's name and in the name of a third sibling, which allowed him to sell the house. But then, Kenneth White tangled with the wrong authority altogether. He tangled with the bank, who reported him after he forged Lydia's signature to get a $13,000 check made out to him and cashed. Soon, the police were able to charge him with bank fraud and to take him to trial. The police interviewed Kenneth several times, but did not have probable cause to arrest him. He moved to a trailer in Gary, Indiana in November of 1997. Kenneth was arrested for failure to register as a sex offender. He was released, but rearrested again the following month for bank fraud. He had allegedly forged Lydia's name on a check for that $13,000. The charges gave police what they needed to search Kenneth White's new home in Gary, Indiana, the trailer he had purchased after he had sold the house. Police found the first tiny bits of evidence they'd ever found: a blood-soaked child sock and a blood-stained pair of men's gym shoes, both stuffed into a crawl space within the trailer. They launched a search for the remains, but never found them. One wonders why Kenneth kept the sock and shoes, after having otherwise disposed of the bodies in a relatively neat, clean way. Perhaps these were oversights. Maybe he found them later and threw them somewhere he thought they'd never be found. Chicago isn't like Florida or Louisiana. There aren't bayous or swamps to throw a body into, but there are plenty of animals that might eat remains out in rural Indiana, including bears and coyote. Did Kenneth dump the bodies somewhere where wild animals might destroy them? Did he cut them up into such small pieces that he was able to scatter them in dozens of places? Prosecutors emphasized at trial that they believed Kenneth had killed his entire family. Nevertheless, it was a fraud trial, not a murder trial. In 1997, Kenneth White committed suicide in his jail cell at the Federal Metropolitan Correctional Center. He hung himself with a bedsheet tied to a sprinkler at 4 a.m. on Christmas morning. He left a note, but never left any information about his missing family members. Why did it take so long for the police to start investigating? Why didn't Everett's family members or employees call any sooner than they did? Why wasn't his dad worried after being told by Everett that he was going home because Kenneth was chasing Lydia around with an axe? Why didn't the neighbors hear anything or see anything while the murders were taking place in the middle of the day? Why did Kenneth paint the bathtub? Was it because he chopped them up there? Did he take the path of least resistance after finding it impossible to remove the stains? Where are the bodies and where is the van? Why didn't the police take Lydia's complaints about being threatened with an axe more seriously? Why didn't Lydia and Everett throw Kenneth out after the first incident? Officially, the missing Thompson family remains a missing persons case. There are no leads. Oddly, there is little in the way of media coverage about this case. It seems like it got very little news coverage even at the time, and received very little news coverage even after Kenneth went to trial. Why or how did the murder of an entire family fail to capture much media attention? Will we ever know the answers to these questions? What are your thoughts? Do you have any insights? Of course, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you once again for watching my video. My name is Vince. Would you please consider supporting my channel by either buying me a cup of coffee at my Patreon account linked below, or even treating yourself to some merchandise at my online shop. I truly appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this story, you might also enjoy the still mysterious and unsolved Durman family case. You will find a link to that story in the upper right corner of your screen. Thank you.